The way people would tell if billboards were working is they would actually do a match market test. So you'd create market pairs and you would do billboards in one and no billboards in the other. And then you would see how those market pairs evolved over time. And so we did something very similar at FleetPride. So we were confident in what digital results we were getting. What we didn't know is what halo all that digital marketing might have on our salespeople and our branches. And so we did geo-pairing. So we took markets, like material sizes of our business, paired them up, and then we did basically our first test that we did there was turn marketing off and leave it on and then see what happens. And what we were able to do then is with a high degree of confidence say that the digital marketing was highly accretive to the local branch and sellers.
Hi, I'm Benj, founder CEO at Proton AI, the AI-powered CRM built specifically for distributors. And you're listening to In the Mind of a Distributor, where we interview the smartest minds in distribution. Let's get into it. Kevin, thanks so much for joining In the Mind of a Distributor. Kevin Weadick was at Grainger, then at Zoro, then at FleetPride, and now at TricorBraun. Lots and lots of distribution experience. We got connected, I think, when you were still at Zoro. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Benj. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I think to get started, it'd be awesome to hear a little bit about how you first got into distribution. How did you end up at Grainger? Did you wake up, when you were a kid dreaming of selling industrial products or what was the journey?
No, I did not. So I joined UC right out of undergrad, and I did that for 5 years and then decided I did not want to be an accountant. But my largest client had been 3M, and I had gotten to learn a lot about 3M and their supply chains. Obviously, they're more of a manufacturer, but I decided I was going to go back to grad school and get re-credentialed and focus on supply chain. And so I did that. And then as I was graduating and thinking about where to go work, I was like, well, where is supply chain actually going to be strategically important to the business? And a distributor is basically supply chain. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go work at Grainger because they're a leading distributor. They're really innovative in the space, and they are going to, put me in a position to where the thing I'm passionate about is actually core and central to the strategic execution of the business. So.
Yep, got it. So when you came into Grainger, you were focused on supply chain.
I was.
And then you were at Grainger for 20 years.
Yeah, because Zoro is part of Grainger, wholly owned subsidiary. So
yes.
Yeah, I was there for almost 21 years. So Zoro kind of was born out of that. And so, there was a couple of people that came over from Japan that were a part of the original 7-person team that started Zoro. I was not one of those folks. So I came in after the business had grown up a bit and was really probably the second leader of the business after the person that led it through its kind of early days. And then I think, Zoro started out probably initially more as a brand that was like a separate brand leveraging Grainger's supply chain. And to a little bit, it was leveraging Grainger's existing supply relationships. So it'd be, like 3M, you have 80,000 items in your portfolio and Grainger only merchandises 10,000. Zoro wants to merchandise all the others. Can you drop ship them? And so it started kind of as that. When I got there, then we pivoted and we said, hey, there's probably a group of distributors that aren't as strong at e-commerce as we are. And we might be able to do what Zoro's doing for Grainger, which is reach kind of small businesses. So we might be able to form partnerships with those distributors, take their assortment and be able to merchandise it and then have them fulfill on our behalf. So the thing that became really, really different with Zoro was versus say Monotaro was Zoro was a platform, whereas Monotaro was a traditional distributor that just with a really, really, really heavy e-commerce focus.
Yep. And how did you, I feel like there's like all kinds of challenges that come with sort of like the marketplace model. You know, it shows up in someone else's box, how do returns work? How did you guys sort of sort through those things once you broke off from, okay, we're just like shipping Grainger's products under a new name?
Yep. So part of it was there were certain things that we asked for. And so we had a playbook for basically getting a distributor live. And part of that playbook was we're going to need you to ship in a brown box, and we're going to help you format like a shipping label and a packing slip that has limited branding on it, and so it doesn't refer to that distributor's brand, it refers to Zoro's brand. All the communications that the customer gets are going to reference them back to Zoro. So you're going to handle fulfillment. We're actually going to give you the freight contracts to ship on and everything like that. So we're going to make it super simple for you. You just need to ship, and we need you to give us certain information back when you ship so that we can pass that information back to the customer so that they know what the tracking number for the package is, all those kinds of things. Then if the customer has any issues, they're going to return to us. And then depending on who we partnered with, you just negotiated different types of return arrangements. We generally had a fairly low return rate. And so it ended up not being the return thing wasn't like a huge issue. And then we just needed to be really thoughtful about what's the right pricing. And again, that part of the business was super high return on invested capital because we had no assets, right? We were basically coordinating the outreach between a distributor and the customer. And so we sat in the middle of all that. But we would also protect the distributor's anonymity. And so distributors might not want anyone to know that they were shipping on Zoro because that could create channel conflict for them.
Yeah.
And so what we said was, if you're selling us a product by brand X or brand Y, that's what we'll say is the supplier on the website. We'll say, hey, this is brand Y's product. This is brand X's product. And from that, we would actually just merchandise it as whatever the brand was and not say where we were actually sourcing it from. And so it worked pretty well. I think when I joined, maybe like 1% of sales was not off Grainger's supply chain. And when I left, it was, much, much higher percentage of sales were not off Grainger's supply chain. And so it really helped the business model scale. At Zoro, there would be times when we delisted suppliers because even though we had their assortment, they just couldn't deliver in a way that was meaningful for the customer. They couldn't do what they said they were going to do. And so we couldn't continue with them because their execution, and maybe their execution in their core business is fine, and they deprioritized us or whatever it was, but their execution didn't allow us to create the right kind of brand perception for Zoro because we wanted to make sure we were giving a great experience. And so I think what I would say is you can add more items to your assortment, but you have to be able to credibly serve against that. And it has to actually tie at some level like your customer needs. And so Zoro tended to look for how do we expand our assortment relative to where do we think these are big areas of interest from a category standpoint for our customer base.
Yep. Makes sense. Got it. So it sounds like pricing is quite different than sort of a traditional distributor. So you have to think through that. Mm-hmm. And this sort of like execution of a marketplace is just different than shipping your own stuff. And so if you're not good at that skill, it's not going to work because the customer experience will suffer. You need
to be able to create the business processes that allow you to orchestrate that distributed commerce. And if you can't do that, you're going to probably actually like damage your brand because you're not going to actually serve the customer very well. You do see like there's partnerships out in distribution where you see distributors that are in really different market segments that are partnering and extending their assortment to each other. And so, those are absolutely helpful ways. But there's an agreement between those parties that they're going to fulfill with, this service level agreement. And if they can meet that service level agreement, then it can work really well. Zoro has a little bit simpler challenge than say like a true marketplace because Zoro, it's a marketplace scale assortment, but it is more of a buy-sell relationship with specific distributors. And so you can't just list on Zoro.
It's more curated.
Yeah. It's an invite only. And by invite, it's like the two parties agreeing to do business with each other, as opposed to someone just like goes and signs up and, starts trying to come up in the search feed.
Yeah. And this is probably a good transition to your experience at FleetPride, because I think probably a pushback that I think someone might give to that as well. Easy to say, all marketing is really finance when you don't have a sales team. You put an ad on Google Ads, you figure, but then like, how does that model translate to a world where you have branches, you have boots on the ground that are going out and calling on customers. The sort of like CAC math is like way more complicated when you have like human beings involved.
It is, but you can still understand it. So, and then the way you understand it is you actually, so when I was at FleetPride, one of the things that we did was we started doing more digital marketing than we had done.
So wait, before you jump into this, can you give like the 5 seconds on what FleetPride is for those who don't know?
FleetPride is America's largest heavy-duty truck part provider serving the aftermarket. So think of it as, semis, dump trucks, buses, all those kinds of things. When something on them breaks, FleetPride, through its network of 300 plus branches, is there to actually get you the parts that you need. It's really different than Grainger in some ways and very similar in others. It's really different in that the products tend to be really heavy. So the branch network is super important for fulfillment. And a lot of the fulfillment is done on its own delivery as opposed to through common carrier or a lot of walk-in traffic to the branches. So those are really big elements of FleetPride's value proposition. Then very similar to Grainger in that go to market with a sales force, go to market with branches, go to market with e-commerce and long tail distribution. So like selling things that customers don't necessarily hold in inventory and they didn't know what they needed until they needed it.
So going back to the sort of finance point, how you brought that lesson over into an environment that you had e-commerce, but also branches and reps and the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think for us, it was really just making sure that the team could go on a journey of kind of learning. And so what we wanted to understand when we were there is what's the value of the marketing aside from the value of, just having the seller or just having the branch. And so to do that, you go back to kind of an older school test. The way people would tell if billboards were working is they would actually do like a match market test. So you'd create market pairs and you would do billboards in one and no billboards in the other. And then you would see how those market pairs evolved over time. And so we did something very similar at FleetPride. So we were confident in what digital results we were getting. What we didn't know is what halo all that digital marketing might have on our salespeople and our branches. And so we did geo-pairing. So we took markets, like material sizes of our business, paired them up, and then we did basically our first test that we did there was turn marketing off and leave it on, and then see what happens. And what we were able to do then is, with a high degree of confidence, say that the digital marketing was highly accretive to the local branch and sellers. And think of it as it just, the website just became, and the marketing halo that we generated off of it just became the salesperson's right hand, individual when they couldn't be there. It was just a way to make sure that FleetPride would always be in the consideration set and staying top of mind. And you had a lot of people that would use their phones to order, or even just they would use their phone, see an ad, know that FleetPride had the product. They could go to our website, check if it was in stock. They might not place the order online. They might call, they might drive in. But what we saw was that the marketing we were doing generated a tremendous halo into the branch and for the sellers. And so it allowed us to have confidence to scale our ambitions and be more aggressive.
Yep.
Most sales reps spend 72% of their week on admin tasks instead of actually selling. Proton changes that. We're a CRM built for distributors that guides your reps on who to call and what to sell. Our AI assistant Pronto even gives instant answers to questions like, what do I need to know about this account? Or which product should I pitch them next? Swish nearly tripled their growth rate by using Proton. You could too. Start by visiting proton.ai to learn more. Now back to the show.
So I feel like the common marketing adage is, I know half of my marketing doesn't work. I just don't know which half.
Yeah.
You were actually testing what marketing activities were working and then scaling those activities.
Yes. And then you'd be like, well, what if I spent more? And so then you can test for scaling up your spend,
Right.
And that's a pattern that's existed, for a lot of years. Right.
Yep.
It's the same as like a coupon code in an email, When
Right.
someone like you confer a discount to someone and then they buy and they enter that code. That was what catalogs did years and years ago, right? Before the advent of any e-commerce. They wanted to know how effective that marketing vehicle was. So they created a custom code for it.
Yep. Makes a ton of sense. And that playbook makes sense on the marketing side. One other question on FleetPride. Zoro, obviously no salespeople, obviously 100% centralized. Grainger has branches, but has a fairly centralized model in terms of like the sales process and the tools. There are some distributors that operate on the far end of that spectrum that are basically every branch gets to decide what they want to do. Yep. How did you guys think about that at FleetPride, and how did that change over time as you were thinking about investing in digital capabilities that were sort of platform wide?
I think when we thought about it, ignore maybe like the digital piece, but I think as we thought about like supply chain management and the branches, like historically branches had defined their own, this is what I'm going to stock, this is my inventory. And so you'll see a lot of that in more traditional distribution where the local branch has a lot of autonomy in determining what they buy, what they have in inventory, and all those kinds of things. And I think what we tried to do is understand there's so much signal that you can get that you can use that signal to inform your decision making and think about how you deploy inventory in order to drive customer experience and customer expectations. And so we probably did some work while I was at FleetPride to really lean in and think about how do we help the branch? How do we build more trust so that the branch allows us to create a little bit more centralization? And how do we use all the signal we have from inquiries or sales orders or quotes to really think about what the inventory footprint should look like in that local market, and then help the branches build trust that we have a team, that's capable of like delivering against it. And so, I think local relationships are super important. So I think from whether it's through a branch or a local sales force, there are still a ton of people in distribution where the customer buys because of the relationships they have with their sales team. And that's in large part because their sales team is the face of the broader organization. And the person that if something were to go wrong, they know will make it right. And so, I think there's a huge importance in relationship-driven selling and building those relationships. Where the central team can help is how do we back you up and how do we help you be really effective in maintaining and sustaining those relationships. So,
yep. Did you actually see an improvement in profitability from centralizing some of those functions? Because I feel like that's always the tension is people are like, well, the branch, they have better data about what's happening in that particular market, so we don't want to centralize it. And they don't trust corporate to do it right. And so, I feel like it sounds good that it sort of became like more central.
Scale. Yeah, test, learn, scale. You go find a few people that are willing to evaluate the decision making that you're making. So I remember we were piloting some of the inventory work we had done. And so we went to one of the branches that was probably the most skeptical. And we asked the leader to be a part of the pilot and commit to certain behaviors. The feedback was, well, I looked at the top 500 items that you were recommending, and, I only disagreed with 2. So you guys are doing pretty good work. I think a lot of that is just about change management. It's not actually about whether you can do it better or not. You could probably centralize some things and destroy value, and you can centralize some things and create a lot of value. The important part is to have the right feedback loops and then to build trust. And so for us at FleetPride, it was whether it was on pricing or whether it was on inventory strategy or whatever it was like we needed to go build trust with the local teams. And so you get a group of folks from those local teams to be very engaged in the pilot and to give you great feedback and to tell you when you're not being as successful as maybe it looks like you think you're going to be on paper. So, and then learn. And then they become your change agents, your advocates. You take the people that have a lot of organizational trust from their peers because their peers know. And then, the other thing is you help them be really successful. They're going to tend to make more money because their incentive structures are going to reward them for it. And then that's a really great way to build trust with someone is to do the kind of work that impacts their paycheck and allows them to actually earn more money for themselves and their local teams. And so I think, it's part do the right thing. It's part make sure that you do a great job of communicating it, because I think most initiatives fail because of a lack of communication.
Yep. Especially if they're value accretive initiatives like what you're
Yes.
describing. So,
well, and if you're asking people to change, no one likes change. Like,
yeah.
people say they do, they don't. It is the rare person that actually wants to do something differently. And so you need to show them that something is better. And you need to help them really learn to see the difference and why it's better. And if you do that, and you do that in a way that's really respectful of the heritage of the business and the things that they've been great at, and you're just there to help them be even more successful, and you take that perspective and you manage the change really well, and then you scale the change in a way that allows the organization to have the capacity to scale change, then good things will happen.
Yep. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Pivoting to TricorBraun, which is the company you're at now, which is a new adventure for you.
Yep.
Give us the quick preview on Tricor, and then would love to hear about sort of you ramping up into another business, which is actually pretty different from FleetPride and different from Grainger. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was part of the excitement about joining it. So one, I knew the previous leader, Cor Carruthers, from my time at Grainger, and he was retiring and had reached out. And I wasn't really thinking about making a move, but as I learned more and more about it, I was like, wow, this is really different. This is an amazing business. So TricorBraun is the, largest North American rigid packaging distributor and one of the world's largest rigid packaging distributors. What is that? And it's like all the kinds of stuff you see behind me. And so, we are across a variety of substrates, from glass, aluminum, plastic, to also like flexible packaging. It's a global business. So we have operations in North America, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand. And so it's a little bit broader scope and scale business, from a geographic footprint than what FleetPride was. And then FleetPride and Grainger were both what I would describe as long tail. You'd sell someone a widget, and then 2 days later, you'd sell them a different widget, and 2 days later, a different widget. The number of times
it's like the MRO versus OEM.
Really low. Yeah, that's not this. We have some customers that are buying millions of bottles from us, or millions of closures from us. We have other customers that are buying tens of thousands of bottles or closures from us. So that dynamic is really different. Really, the way I think about it is we help brands scale. When we're at our best, we're that partner for your brand and helping you get your brand to market. We do have an e-commerce, presence, but that's more around brand awareness. And so really the way we create value is through a direct sales force that is out scouring the market every day, trying to understand what are the up and coming brands that we can help them navigate from growth all the way, kind of from those early days all the way to like they're in every supermarket across the country.
And so what are sort of the big digital lessons you're bringing to the business? I mean, you described, sort of test and learn concept, sort of thinking about marketing from a finance lens.
I think we're, a lot of what we're focused on is data-driven, creating data-driven insights, that help our team be more successful. So we're doing a lot of, I've only been here 5 months, so we're still working through it. We've had some really productive conversations with our board about where we want to go. But what I would say is a lot of what we've talked to our team members about is, because it's kind of bumpy out there right now, especially for a lot of our brands are consumer product companies, and, the consumer's under stress. And so we've talked a lot about how do we be resilient, talked a lot about where do we think there's opportunities for them to grow, and how we think about both share of wallet and net new name accounts. And so, I think in the coming months, we'll have a pretty big conversation with our team about, hey, here's what we've learned as an executive team, and here's where we're going. We're kind of right in the throes of doing all that work right now as an executive team, which has been super fun for the team. But it is, I'd say right now, our number one mantra is focus on being in front of customers, listening to the challenges they're going through, whether they're tariff related, whether they're demand related, both brands that are scaling or brands that are shrinking, and how do we help them, be successful in serving their customers? Because that's how we'll be successful.
Yep. Which goes back to where we started. You talking about why it didn't matter that you didn't grow up in sales. And the answer is because you care about the customer. And that's the same approach here. Awesome. We love to end on the same question, which is, we value curiosity at Proton's, one of our core values. And so what's one thing you still don't have a good answer for, or are still trying to figure out or learn in distribution, even after such a long career in the business?
I think it's like everything. Seriously. I love that your value is curiosity, because I think that's one of the most important things that any team member can have is being curious and always thinking about how can we do this better? One area we're really curious about is generative AI. How can we use that? We have all this information that's trapped in disparate systems. And is there a way to think about how we can bring that information together and give it to our team members so that we can help them be more effective in serving the customer? And so I'm super curious about that right now, just because I do think it's going to be transformative. I just don't think everybody knows exactly how yet, but I'm really, really curious there. But I love curiosity because, I'm pretty sure that the team at Zoro is doing stuff way better than they were doing it when I was there. And I'm pretty sure the team at FleetPride will have great success. And it's like, as a leader, what you want to do is actually just build a team that gets really curious about how you serve the customer better and just constantly challenges itself for how can we do this in a way where, we're more efficient, so we have more time to support the customer in ways that are impactful for them, or we can do this differently and it will allow us to take share because we're going to distinguish ourselves in the value that we can create. And so curiosity is super important.
Yeah. And it strikes me that from sort of the mindset you described of sort of test and learn, that's an environment that curiosity can really thrive in, right? You got an idea, try it out, see if it works.
Yeah. At Zoro, we modeled this concept that Monotaro had, which is you do like an A/B test in e-commerce, and they were very thoughtful about, even if it's no better, the test is no better than the control, but it's not worse, they're going to do it, because by doing it, it encourages team members to be like, oh, I can see my work come to life. And I'm going to continue to be curious because they're taking my ideas and they're bringing them forward. And so, it was one of those things where people want to make good differences in their business. And so you want to empower them to make those choices. And then you want to think about how you nurture that curiosity. And so it was a cool kind of way to think about how do we make sure that we're creating these really positive feedback loops with our team members so that they always want to bring new ideas to the table.
Yeah, love that. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was awesome, Benj. I appreciate you having me.
That's it for this episode of In the Mind of a Distributor. If you like this conversation, leave a review. It helps more folks in distribution find the show. If you're thinking about a CRM for your business, head to proton.ai to see how Proton can help you grow faster. Or if you want to connect with me, you can add me, Benj Cohen, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.